Autumn had come early to the Arizona Territory in 1885, painting the hills with streaks of gold and brown. The wind whipped across the dry trail, lifting dust and loose leaves into swirling eddies that danced beneath the low-hanging clouds. Somewhere beyond the horizon, dark storm clouds gathered, heavy with the promise of rain. The air carried a sharp chill, a warning that winter's first hand was already reaching out. Harrison Kane guided his wagon down the winding trail with the steady hand of a man accustomed to control. He was a figure of authority and quiet strength, a wealthy rancher whose reputation stretched across miles of dusty terrain. His boots rested firmly on the footboard, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the trail ahead. The wagon behind him creaked under the weight of its cargo, fine leather saddles, reins, and belts, all carefully packed for a government contract. This shipment was more than business. It was a step toward cementing Harrison's legacy, the fruit of years of hard work, ambition, and unyielding determination. Harrison's life had always been governed by order. Every ranch hand, every contract, every detail of the Double Star Ranch was measured and managed to perfection. His wealth had brought him respect, influence, and comfort. Yet, as he steered the wagon along the uneven trail, the sky darkening above him, there was a flicker of unease in his mind. Nature, Harrison knew, was a force no man could fully control. He adjusted his grip on the reins as a gust of wind rattled the wagon wheels, carrying with it a faint scent of rain. The dust rose and fell in waves along the trail, and the horizon darkened to a slate gray. Harrison squinted against the wind, trying to gauge the distance to Silver Ridge. It was still hours away, yet the clouds seemed to be moving faster than the sun, casting shadows that raced across the rugged landscape. The trail ahead was rough and unpredictable, and Harrison, confident in his wealth and experience, could not ignore the gnawing worry that something might go wrong. As the wagon lumbered over a jagged patch of ground, a sudden, sharp snap cut through the steady creaking of wood and wheels. Harrison felt the entire wagon lurch violently to the side. He slammed the reins down, bringing the horses to a stop, and leapt down from the wagon bed. His heart pounded as he ran to the rear wheel. The left rear wheel was shattered, splintered wood jutting out at odd angles, metal rim twisted and useless. Harrison's cargo teetered dangerously, threatening to tumble onto the rocky trail. A knot of frustration tightened in his chest, and for the first time in years, he felt the sting of helplessness. All the wealth, all the influence, all the careful planning of a lifetime, none of it could repair this wheel in the middle of nowhere. Rain began to fall in light, cold droplets, quickly soaking through his coat and making the dust turn to mud. Harrison's jaw tightened as he assessed the damage. The storm was approaching faster than he had anticipated, and the trail ahead was still long. His cargo was invaluable, not just in monetary terms but in the promise it held for his future. Losing it would mean more than financial loss, it would be a personal failure. Yet just as despair began to creep in, Harrison caught sight of three small figures emerging from the distance. They moved steadily along the trail, their steps sure despite the wind and rain. Children. Their clothes were worn, and their faces streaked with dirt, but there was something in their posture, something unyielding, even brave, that drew Harrison's attention. Little did he know, these three orphans, Eli, Clara, and Ben, were about to change the course of his life in ways he could never have imagined. For in that moment, the fate of a wealthy rancher and three children on a simple journey home would collide, setting in motion a chain of events that neither wealth nor experience could have predicted. The storm continued its slow approach, the wind howling across the barren hills, and Harrison, stranded with a broken wheel, could only watch as the three children drew nearer, their small forms determined against the vast and merciless landscape. The three children moved closer, their small figures framed against the darkening sky. Eli, the eldest, led the way with a steady step, his sharp eyes scanning the trail for rocks, roots, and any sign of danger. Clara walked just behind him, her nimble fingers clutching a small bundle of cloth and twine. Ben, the youngest, lagged slightly, but he kept up with surprising determination, the corners of his mouth twitching with nervous excitement. All three were heading home to St. Agnes' Home for Children, unaware that the path they followed would soon intertwine with a wealthy man's desperate plight. Harrison's hands, still muddy from examining the broken wheel, trembled slightly as he straightened. He had been through many crises, threats to livestock, stampedes, land disputes, but never a disaster quite like this. Here, stranded in the Arizona wilderness, wealth and reputation counted for nothing. His wagon's cargo, the key to his government contract, now rested precariously on a shattered wheel. The rain, now falling steadily, threatened to soak the precious leather and ruin the deal entirely. Every hour lost would bring him closer to disaster. Eli approached first, pausing a few feet away. He raised a hand politely but confidently. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need help?" Harrison blinked, assessing the small boy. His first instinct was to wave them off. Who were these children, mere orphans, to offer aid to a man of his standing? And yet, the practicality of the situation left him little choice. He had no time to wait for the storm to pass or for a passing rider to notice his plight. His pride battled with necessity. I could use a hand," he admitted, his voice steady though his mind raced. "But this is no small task. Are you certain you can help?" Clara stepped forward, her bright eyes meeting his. "We can try. Sister Agnes always says that even the smallest hands can make a difference when hearts are willing." Harrison felt a pang of humility. The children, despite their youth and the visible hardships they faced, carried an unshakable sense of purpose. There was courage here he hadn't expected, and it was infectious. He motioned toward the broken wheel. "If you can fix that, we might just get this wagon to town before the storm worsens." Ben, eager to help but hardly understanding the gravity, ran to gather small sticks and scraps that might reinforce the wheel. Eli examined the splintered wood, his brow furrowed in concentration. Clara knelt beside the hub, inspecting the wheel as though she could divine a solution by sheer observation. The three children worked silently but efficiently, communicating with small gestures and quiet words. Harrison watched, fascinated. Rain fell harder now, cold and relentless, drumming against the wagon's roof. The wind tossed the children's hair into their faces, yet they did not flinch. They adapted quickly, using ingenuity and whatever materials were at hand. Eli secured sturdy branches to the rim, Clara tied them tightly with twine, and Ben hammered in scraps of wood and metal that had been discarded along the trail. Step by step, the wheel began to take shape again, crude perhaps, but functional. Harrison realized something profound. These children, with their meager possessions and their small, untrained hands, were accomplishing what he had feared impossible. He had wealth, tools, and experience, yet their ingenuity and determination surpassed his expectations. There was a lesson here he hadn't anticipated: resourcefulness and courage often outshine power and riches. The storm continued to rage, the wind gusting in violent bursts, yet the children pressed on. Harrison, once consumed entirely by the pursuit of wealth and reputation, found himself silently rooting for them, a warmth growing in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps this was the beginning of something far greater than a repaired wagon, a lesson in humility, trust, and the unexpected strength of a kind heart. By the time Harrison lent a helping hand, it was no longer about pride. It was about survival, hope, and witnessing a small miracle unfold before him. And as the rain soaked him through, he could not help but admire the courage of these three unlikely heroes, who seemed determined to prove that even the smallest hands can change the course of destiny. The rain fell steadily now, soaking the parched earth and turning the trail into a slick ribbon of mud. The storm's intensity grew, gusts of wind whipping against Harrison's coat and rattling the wagon. But the three children, Eli, Clara, and Ben, remained undeterred, their focus absolute. Harrison watched from the side, boots sinking slightly into the wet soil, as a sense of awe and wonder replaced his earlier frustration. These children were not simply helping, they were taking control of a situation that he, a man of means and experience, could not manage alone. Clara knelt beside the shattered wheel, her small fingers tracing the jagged edges of the broken spokes. She paused, considering the problem as if reading the wood itself. "We'll need to make it sturdy," she said to Eli. "We can't just slap it together." Eli nodded, scanning the nearby brush for branches strong enough to bear the weight of the wagon. His hands moved quickly, breaking off pieces of sapling wood, testing them for strength, and laying them aside in neat piles. Ben, the youngest, darted from side to side, collecting scraps of wood, old nails, and even twisted strips of metal from the roadside. His energy was tireless, his spirit bright, even as the rain plastered his hair to his forehead. Harrison felt a lump in his throat. He had spent his life accumulating wealth and knowledge, yet these children, with nothing but courage, ingenuity, and determination, were accomplishing a task that he had feared impossible. Step by step, he realized that power did not always come from money or status. Sometimes, it came from the heart. Clara secured a branch to the broken rim with strips of twine, tying knots with careful precision. "Hold it steady," she called to Eli, who braced the wheel with saplings he had gathered. Ben hammered in the scraps of metal he had found, each strike ringing sharply through the storm. Harrison stepped closer, offering guidance, but he noticed how naturally the children worked together. They had an unspoken rhythm, a quiet communication that required no words. The wind howled, gusting violently across the plain. Rain pounded against the wagon and soaked Harrison to the bone. The wheel swayed under the pressure, and for a moment, he feared it would fail again. But the children did not falter. Their determination was unwavering, their small hands moving with precision and courage. Harrison found himself rooting for them, a warmth growing in his chest he had not felt in years. Minutes stretched into an hour, the storm showing no signs of relenting. Sweat and rain mixed on their faces, but gradually, the wheel began to take shape. It was crude, improvised, yet remarkably strong. Each branch and scrap of metal added a layer of stability, each knot and hammer strike a testament to ingenuity and teamwork. Harrison could hardly believe it, these children had built a wheel capable of carrying the wagon's precious cargo safely to town. Finally, Clara stepped back, examining their work. "It should hold," she said, voice steady despite exhaustion. Eli tightened the last brace, nodding in agreement, and Ben, beaming with pride, dropped his hammer with a satisfied clink. Harrison approached, his hands on his hips, admiration shining in his eyes. "You've done it," he said, almost in disbelief. I never expected this. You've built something incredible." The children exchanged glances, proud but humble. Clara smiled faintly. "We just did what we could, sir. Sister Agnes always says to help others when you can." Harrison felt an unfamiliar warmth swell in his chest. This was more than a wheel fixed or cargo saved, it was a lesson in courage, selflessness, and hope. These children had reminded him that even in the harshest, loneliest moments, ingenuity and heart could overcome the greatest obstacles. As the storm raged around them, Harrison Kane, a man who had spent his life counting wealth and power, realized something deeper. For the first time, he saw the value of small hands, determined hearts, and the quiet strength of teamwork. In the midst of a tempest, he had witnessed a miracle born not of money, but of kindness, courage, and ingenuity. And in that realization, he began to see that this encounter would change his life forever. The makeshift wheel held firm. Harrison tested it cautiously, prodding and pressing where the splintered spokes had once threatened disaster. To his astonishment, the children's clever work had held against the strain. The wagon wobbled slightly as he guided the horses, but the improvised wheel bore the weight of his cargo without complaint. The storm still raged around them, rain pelting their faces, wind tugging at their coats, yet the immediate danger had passed. Harrison allowed himself a deep breath, feeling a tension he hadn't realized had tightened his chest slowly release. "Remarkable," he said aloud, almost to himself. "Absolutely remarkable." He turned to the children, who stood huddled together under the relentless rain, faces smudged with dirt and soaked to the bone, yet alight with pride. Their small forms, trembling slightly from cold and exertion, seemed almost heroic in the tempest's shadow. Harrison's eyes softened. They had risked themselves, defying the storm, to help a man they barely knew. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a few coins. "Here," he said, offering them. "For your trouble. You've earned it." Eli's eyes widened, but he shook his head firmly. "No, sir. We don't need payment. Sister Agnes says we help because it's the right thing to do, not for coins or gold." Clara nodded, brushing mud from her sleeves. "We just want to help." Ben, ever the cheerful one, added, "Besides, we'd never get paid enough to fix something this big anyway." Harrison felt a lump rise in his throat. He had expected gratitude, perhaps a polite refusal, but not this profound selflessness. These children, living lives that were hard and often lonely, were giving of themselves without expectation of reward. It was a purity of heart he had almost forgotten existed. All the contracts, all the profits, all the respect he had spent decades cultivating suddenly seemed pale in comparison to the simple courage and goodness of these three small figures standing before him. He could not help but smile, a genuine smile that touched his eyes. "You've taught me something today," he said softly. "Not about wagons or wood, but about life. About what really matters." The rain continued to fall, washing away the dust of the trail and the sweat of effort, leaving a renewed sense of clarity in Harrison's heart. He realized that for all his wealth, there had been moments where he had overlooked the value of kindness, the power of community, and the simple impact of helping others. And here, in the unlikeliest of circumstances, he had been reminded. Eli, Clara, and Ben exchanged quiet glances, pride mingled with humility. The children had never considered themselves heroes. To them, they had simply done what they thought was right. Yet Harrison could see clearly that their courage and ingenuity had done more than save a wagon, they had altered the course of his day, perhaps even his life. As the storm began to abate, Harrison prepared to guide the wagon toward Silver Ridge once more. The wheel creaked under the strain, but it held steady, carrying with it not just goods for a contract, but a lesson in hope, courage, and generosity. Harrison glanced back at the three children. "Come on," he said gently. "We'll get this wagon to town. Together." The children's faces lit with quiet determination. For the first time, Harrison realized that strength did not always come from money, power, or experience. It came from heart, ingenuity, and the willingness to act, no matter the odds. And in the shadow of the storm, he felt a shift within himself. A newfound respect, a warmth of admiration, and an awareness that the simplest acts of kindness could hold a weight far greater than gold. As the wagon rolled forward, splashing through puddles and mud, Harrison knew that this encounter would linger in his thoughts long after the trail dried. These three children, so small and so seemingly powerless, had done what he could not, reminded him of humanity, courage, and the immeasurable value of helping others without expectation. And in that moment, he realized the day's trials were only the beginning of a story far greater than he had ever imagined. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the Arizona landscape glistening with fresh rain. Patches of sunlight pierced the clouds, reflecting off puddles and wet leaves along the trail. Harrison Kane's wagon rolled steadily toward Silver Ridge, but his mind was elsewhere. The events of the previous evening lingered, a quiet echo of awe and admiration. He could not stop thinking about the three children, Eli, Clara, and Ben, and the courage, ingenuity, and selflessness they had displayed in the midst of the storm. Harrison's thoughts turned to the orphanage, St. Agnes Home for Children. He remembered the stories the children had briefly shared about Sister Agnes, the woman who had guided them in kindness and taught them to help others without expecting anything in return. He could picture the little home tucked among the hills, a place of safety and love, yet limited in resources. The children's lives had been difficult, marked by loss and uncertainty, and still, they had given him the gift of hope in the form of their brave and clever hands. Determined to express his gratitude, Harrison altered his route. Instead of heading directly into town, he guided the wagon to the orphanage. The horses splashed through the soft mud along the trail, their steady hooves keeping time with Harrison's pounding thoughts. As he approached the small building, the children's laughter reached him first, a bright and lively sound that contrasted sharply with the weight of the storm from the night before. Eli, Clara, and Ben looked up from a morning chore, wide-eyed and cautious, unsure what to make of Harrison's unexpected visit. Harrison dismounted, boots sinking slightly into the wet earth, and smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said gently, careful not to startle them. "I wanted to thank you, properly." The children shuffled closer, glancing at one another. They had not expected him to return, and certainly not in such a serious, thoughtful manner. Harrison's eyes swept across the small courtyard, noticing the modest garden, the well-worn play area, and the simple, sturdy building that housed the orphans. He saw not just the hardships but the care and devotion that Sister Agnes had instilled in these children, shaping them into resourceful and compassionate souls. He spoke with quiet determination. "I've been thinking about what you did yesterday. Not just the wheel, but your courage and your kindness. It made me realize. I've spent so much of my life chasing wealth, contracts, and respect, and I've overlooked something far more important. Heart. Family. Love. And you three, you've reminded me what truly matters." Eli, Clara, and Ben exchanged glances, a mixture of pride and disbelief on their faces. They had helped because it was right, but never because they thought it would matter to anyone beyond that moment. Now, seeing Harrison's earnest expression, they understood that their actions had made a profound impact. Harrison paused, taking a deep breath. "I want you three to come live with me on my ranch. I want you to have a home, a place where you're safe, where you can learn, grow, and be children without worry. And I want St. Agnes' home to be supported, so the other children who come here have the same opportunities you've had." The children's eyes widened, and Clara's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. Ben blinked, trying to comprehend the magnitude of Harrison's words. Eli's eyes glimmered with both hope and disbelief. For the first time in their young lives, they felt the possibility of a future filled not with uncertainty, but with love, security, and belonging. Harrison smiled, his heart full. The decision was made. These children, whose small hands had saved a wagon and whose courage had restored his own faith in humanity, would now be part of his life forever. And in supporting the orphanage, he would ensure that their legacy of kindness and selflessness would continue, touching the lives of countless other children. As the morning sun broke fully through the clouds, bathing the small courtyard in golden light, Harrison Kane realized something he had never truly understood before: wealth is fleeting, but love, family, and the courage to act selflessly endure. And in the hearts of three brave children, he had found all of these in abundance. Life on the Double Star Ranch changed in ways Harrison Kane had never imagined. The days grew brighter, filled with laughter, learning, and the small joys of ordinary moments. Eli, Clara, and Ben, once strangers to comfort and security, now thrived in the open spaces of the Arizona Territory. Each day brought new lessons, new responsibilities, and above all, a sense of belonging that the children had never known before. Eli discovered a natural affinity for horses. He spent hours in the stables, guiding the animals with patient hands and a quiet authority that drew admiration even from the seasoned ranch hands. Harrison watched from a distance as Eli coaxed a spirited stallion into a gentle trot, the boy's confidence growing with each successful ride. It was a sight that warmed Harrison's heart, reminding him that courage and determination often bloom in unexpected ways. Clara, ever meticulous and inventive, became indispensable in the ranch workshop. She mended harnesses, repaired tools, and even learned to shape leather for saddles, her small hands moving with precision and care. Harrison often found himself pausing to observe her work, amazed at her focus and ingenuity. The workshop, once a place of purely business, now carried the hum of creativity, laughter, and purpose. Ben, the youngest, brought a spark of energy and joy to every corner of the ranch. His laughter echoed across the fields, chasing away silence and gloom. He delighted in helping wherever he could, whether carrying small bundles of feed, tending to the chickens, or chasing his siblings through the tall grass. Harrison realized that Ben's simple cheerfulness was just as valuable as Eli's skill and Clara's industriousness. It reminded everyone that life on the frontier was not solely about survival, but about joy, love, and connection. Harrison himself changed in ways subtle but profound. Once consumed by contracts, accounts, and the pursuit of wealth, he now spent his days teaching the children, guiding them, and learning from them in return. He found himself telling stories of the ranch's history, teaching lessons of horsemanship, and even laughing more freely than he had in years. The walls of his heart, once fortified with the rigidity of ambition and pride, softened with the steady, gentle presence of family. Evenings were the most magical. The golden Arizona sunset bathed the ranch in a warm glow, the sky streaked with colors that seemed almost unreal. The children would ride together across the pastures, Eli on a sturdy gelding, Clara walking alongside a gentle mare, and Ben dashing between them with uncontainable joy. Harrison often stood on the porch, hands resting lightly on the railing, watching the children move freely, their laughter mingling with the whispering wind. In these moments, Harrison realized that wealth had never brought him the fulfillment he now felt. Money could buy comfort, land, and power, but it could not create this sense of home, of love, or of purpose. It could not teach him patience, humility, or the joy of nurturing another life. Those lessons had come from 3 small children, whose courage and kindness had once saved his wagon, and now, in a quiet and unassuming way, were saving his heart. The ranch itself seemed transformed. The stables carried the rhythm of life, the fields echoed with running footsteps, the workshop smelled of leather, wood, and the scent of diligent hands. Harrison's home was no longer a place of cold efficiency, it was alive, breathing with the pulse of family, love, and shared effort. As the sun sank lower, painting the horizon with shades of orange and violet, Harrison felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The 3 children, once orphans with uncertain futures, had become his family. Their presence had reshaped his world, turning a lonely, wealth-driven life into one rich with love, hope, and laughter. And he knew that no matter what challenges the Arizona territory might bring, they would face them together, stronger, happier, and united by the bonds of heart and home. The afternoon sun dipped low over the Double Star Ranch, casting long shadows across the pastures and painting the horizon in shades of gold, orange, and crimson. The air was still, carrying the gentle scent of damp earth and the faint warmth of a day just past. Harrison Kane stood on the porch of his home, leaning lightly on the railing, his eyes tracing the movements of 3 small figures who now held his heart in ways he had never imagined. Eli rode a spirited horse across the open field, reins held firmly in his hands, guiding the animal with skill and confidence. Each stride of the horse echoed strength and patience, a reflection of the boy's growth since the day he had first helped repair Harrison's broken wagon wheel. Beside him, Clara walked alongside a gentle mare, her hands steady, her eyes bright with focus and determination. She carried herself with a quiet pride, a testament to the skills she had honed under Harrison's guidance and her own innate ingenuity. And then there was Ben, darting back and forth with uncontainable joy, laughing freely as he chased the shadows cast by the horses and the tall grass. His small feet barely touched the earth as he ran, his energy infectious, filling the ranch with a lightness and warmth that could not be measured. Harrison smiled, feeling a lump rise in his throat. This was life at its fullest, a simple, pure, and honest happiness that no wealth could buy. As he watched, Harrison's mind wandered back to the day the storm had struck, to the moment when 3 children had appeared on the trail, offering help without hesitation. He remembered the fear he had felt, the helplessness as the wagon teetered on the brink of disaster, and the awe that had followed as Eli, Clara, and Ben worked tirelessly to save both cargo and reputation. That single act of courage and selflessness had changed everything. It had brought the children into his life, given them a home, and reminded him of what truly mattered in the harsh and unpredictable world of the Arizona territory. The ranch, once a place governed by schedules, contracts, and the pursuit of wealth, now pulsed with life and laughter. Horses neighed in the stables, the wind whispered through the trees, and the children's voices rang across the fields. Each corner of the property carried a sense of belonging, of love, and of family. Harrison felt a quiet peace settle over him, a peace that could not be disturbed by storms, accidents, or the passing of time. He reflected on the lesson these small children had taught him. It was not the contracts, the profits, or the acres of land that defined the measure of a man. It was kindness, courage, and the willingness to act for the sake of others. It was in the quiet acts of generosity, in the patience to nurture growth, and in the open heart that could embrace love and family even after years of solitude. The sun continued its slow descent, casting a warm glow over the ranch and painting the children in radiant light. Harrison's eyes softened as he watched them ride, run, and laugh, no longer orphans wandering through a harsh world, but children with a home, a purpose, and a family who would stand beside them through every challenge and triumph. In that moment, Harrison Kane understood fully what he had gained, far beyond material wealth. He had found joy, fulfillment, and a heart wide enough to hold the love of these three remarkable children. The storm, the broken wheel, and the long trail had all been a prelude to something far greater, the discovery that the smallest acts of kindness, the courage to help, and the willingness to trust could bring miracles more lasting and profound than any fortune. The Arizona sunset bathed the Double Star Ranch in golden light as Harrison stepped back, letting the scene unfold before him. Eli, Clara, and Ben rode freely, their laughter carried by the wind, and Harrison, now surrounded by the family he had chosen and who had chosen him, finally knew a joy that money could never buy. And in that quiet, perfect moment, he understood that life's true wealth was measured not in gold, but in love, courage, and the miracles born from a kind and selfless heart. The days at Double Star Ranch continued to unfold in quiet harmony. The storm that had once threatened to ruin Harrison Kane's plans seemed, in retrospect, like a gentle nudge from fate. Without it, he would never have met Eli, Clara, and Ben. Without it, his life, though comfortable and accomplished, might have remained hollow, rich in possessions, yet poor in the things that truly mattered, love, family, and connection. Harrison often found himself pausing to watch the children, marveling at how far they had come. Eli now moved through the stables with the confidence of a young man who understood not only horses, but responsibility and patience. He guided the ranch hands, instructed newcomers in the care of the animals, and even found small joys in teaching the younger orphans who sometimes visited St. Agnes' home. Harrison could see the spark of pride in Eli's eyes, the same spark he had first noticed when the boy had braved the storm to save his wagon. Clara's hands were never still. Whether shaping leather in the workshop or helping with repairs around the ranch, she brought both skill and creativity to every task. Harrison often watched her in silence, feeling both admiration and humility. The child who had once knelt on a muddy trail, figuring out how to save a broken wheel, now managed projects that had once been beyond her imagination. She carried herself with a quiet strength that made Harrison proud and reminded him of the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Ben, forever a bundle of laughter and energy, had transformed the ranch in ways Harrison had never expected. He brought light to every corner, chased shadows across the pastures, and offered simple, unspoken reminders that joy is a treasure in itself. Even when the work of the ranch was grueling, Ben's laughter seemed to lift the weight of the day, and Harrison often found himself smiling just to hear it. In the midst of their youthful energy, he recognized a deeper lesson: happiness, like courage, multiplies when shared. Harrison's own transformation was subtle, yet profound. He now measured his life not in contracts signed or profits earned, but in the laughter of children, the strength of a family, and the enduring lessons of kindness. Each act of care, every lesson taught, every shared meal or playful chase across the pastures, reminded him of the miracle that had begun with a broken wagon wheel and 3 small hands willing to help. The ranch itself seemed to breathe with life. The barns, fields, and workshop carried a rhythm, a heartbeat, made possible by the children and Harrison together. Visitors, ranch hands, and neighbors all sensed the warmth that now filled the ranch, something intangible, yet undeniable. Harrison realized that love and family could transform even the most practical and rugged of places into a home. As the sun set behind the distant mesas, painting the sky with colors no brush could replicate, Harrison stepped onto the porch. Eli rode past on his horse, Clara guided her mare through the golden light, and Ben darted gleefully among them, laughter ringing across the open fields. Harrison took a deep breath, the wind carrying the faint scent of earth, leather, and warm hay. In that perfect moment, he understood fully the lesson of the storm, the wheel, and the children who had walked into his life. The smallest acts of kindness, courage, and selflessness have the power to change lives forever. A broken will had brought him not loss, but blessing. Strangers had become family. And in embracing them, he had discovered a wealth far greater than gold, the wealth of love, joy, and the miracles born of a heart willing to give without expectation. The Double Star Ranch, bathed in sunset, stood as a testament to that truth. Harrison Kane, once a man ruled by business and ambition, now stood surrounded by laughter, life, and family. And for the first time, he knew that the richest fortune of all was the one he had found in the hearts of 3 brave children, and in the home they had built together. The wind rustled softly through the pastures. Horses nickered in the stables. And Harrison, watching his children ride freely across the golden land, smiled, knowing that in this life of hardship and unpredictability, true miracles are born from love, courage, and the kindness of those willing to help. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another Wild West adventure.